What happens when a film adaptation of a book is a critical smash and considered as art by many, but the author of the book it was adapted from hates it with a passion because it changed so much from the book? Well, in Stephen King's case, he makes his own version to right all those wrongs. Hello and welcome to Bloody Good. My name's Emily and this is From the Page to the Screen, a show where I look at horror media and the books they're based on to determine just how accurate they are. As I promised for when we hit 10k subscribers today, I'm looking at The Shining by Stephen King and looking at how he adapted his own book for his 1997 miniseries. The Shining follows Jack Torrance, who takes up the job as winter caretaker at the Overlook Hotel during its off-season, hoping the isolation will help cure his writer's block. He settles into life at the hotel with his wife Wendy and their son Danny, who is troubled by premonitions. The longer the Torrance's stay goes on, the more it seems like the hotel itself is trying to terrorize them. Now, you guys had a lot to say about the original video. I think I reached a lot of Kubrick fans who were not happy that I didn't just bow down to him, and I'm not sorry. In the video I did indeed say that I enjoy his film and that it is brilliant, but as an adaptation, it's poor. And that's the point of this series. You heard me about 20 seconds ago, right? I look at horror media and the books they're based on to determine just how accurate they are. The key word there being accurate. Yes, I may also give my opinion on which version I think is best, but the core of these videos is about accuracy, not quality. We just put out a video about Carrie, and the most accurate film is not the best one of the bunch. They often don't go hand in hand. A lot of comments on the original video told me that the miniseries is much more faithful to the book, but is also terrible. So I watched it and I'm going to tell you my thoughts on this version compared to both the book and Kubrick's film. I'm going to talk mostly about all the things I covered in my original video that I think Kubrick's film got wrong and how this version tackles those. So this is very much a supplemental video to the original. So if you haven't seen that one, go check it out and then come back here. So let's dive in. First, we're going to look at our characters. Jack is played by Steven Weber in the miniseries. In the book, Jack is a really troubled man who lost his job after assaulting a student. He's a recovering alcoholic and has anger issues which stem from the abuse he suffered at the hands of his father growing up. I took issue with Kubrick's film as I felt it hid away from what Jack did. And it's strange because Kubrick's take on Jack seemed to be the suggestion that a man like Jack should be suffering and shouldn't be redeemed for his actions. And yet we don't get confirmation of the reason Jack left teaching. There's no allusion towards the assault. We just get the impression Jack wants to use this time to write his play. Whereas in the miniseries we see the assault on the student and we also see the fit of impatience where he breaks Danny's arm. The miniseries doesn't shy away from these acts of violence that Jack has committed. In the book, a key factor in Jack's behaviour is the fact that he himself had an abusive father. It's obviously not an excuse to then be abusive yourself, but it helps us understand Jack a little bit more. In Kubrick's film, there's basically no mention of Jack's father, but in the miniseries we hear a lot about it. Jack and Wendy have conversations about Jack turning into his father and saying things that sound like his father, and Jack even hears his father's voice around the hotel. The ghosts of the Overlook use Jack's father to control him even in adulthood. Now obviously Jack Nicholson is a great actor and gave a great performance in Kubrick's film, but I felt there were really big chunks of Jack missing in that performance, and I think those chunks were filled in by Steven Weber. I don't think his performance was excellent by any means, it was serviceable, but it did feel more like book Jack to me. There were just more layers that felt true to the book version. Wendy is played by Rebecca De Mornay in the series. My biggest issue with Kubrick's direction of Wendy is that she felt much more timid and fragile compared to her book counterpart. Shelley Duvall did her best with what she was given, but she's hysterical compared to the book Wendy. In the book, Wendy is portrayed as really intelligent. She is constantly observing Jack and watching for any slip-ups he might make. She obviously loves him, but she knows what he's capable of when he's had a drink. So she's evaluating him constantly. She has a lot of agency and actively fights back against Jack when he goes into his rage. In Kubrick's film, she does a lot of flailing and serves more to show just how abusive and scary Jack is rather than being her own character. Here though, I think Wendy has that agency and tenacity. She's still a little bit weak when it comes to the final showdown. She's beaten and on the floor for quite a lot of it. She doesn't quite get the same attack as book Wendy. But on the whole, she doesn't take shit from Jack throughout the book. She actively reminds Jack that if he ever lays a hand on Danny again, she will take Danny and she will leave. She means business in the miniseries, and this is much closer to the book Wendy than we see in Kubrick's version. Danny is played by Courtland Mead in the miniseries. Now, I really liked Danny Lloyd's performance in Kubrick's film. I think Mead's performance here is fine. In the book, Danny is only 5, but is very mature for his age and is aware of what's going on around him. In this version, Danny is explicitly said to be 7 years old, and I think that's to justify the fact that Mead is clearly not a 5-year-old. It's a difficult situation because book Danny is very intelligent and knows things, and I guess maybe it's difficult to cast a young actor capable of portraying that while also believably being 5 years old. In Kubrick's version, you buy that Danny is 5 and you get the gist of his character despite him not saying a whole lot throughout the film. Here though, I think the performance is maybe a bit over the top in places. I think it's an unfortunate product of the time. I think I find a lot of child actor performances from the 90s quite annoying, and this one has unfortunately joined the pack. Danny's shine manifests itself through his imaginary friend Tony. In Kubrick's version, Danny spoke through his finger, which I hated. I thought it was stupid. Here, a young man appears to Danny in several instances and speaks to him. It fits the idea more of an imaginary friend, but it did take me out of it just a little bit to cut to a young man just kind of floating around. In the book, Danny's plagued by all sorts of awful things in the hotel, and I felt that Kubrick's film just scratched the surface of those, but we see more of them in this version, and I think it works really well. Dick Hallorann is played by Melvin Van Peebles in the miniseries. In the book, Hallorann is the cook at the Overlook Hotel and shares Danny's psychic gift, which he names The Shining. One of my biggest issues with Kubrick's film was how Hallorann was handled. He's a really significant character, but you wouldn't know it from Kubrick's film. One of my favourite parts of the book was Hallorann telling Danny he's got the biggest shine he's ever seen, and that if he ever needs help while at the Overlook, to use his shine to call out for him. And he does. Now, a bunch of you also commented on the last video calling me out here, and I definitely worded myself wrong. I said that Hallorann goes back to the hotel on a whim, which was a poor choice of words on my behalf, I admit it completely. In the book, Hallorann is almost wiped out by the force of Danny screaming for help. In Kubrick's film, we see Danny frothing at the mouth and Hallorann sitting wide-eyed and unflinching. It's just not as dramatic as the book scene. In the miniseries, we get Hallorann being physically knocked around by the force of Danny's messages, which was really cool to see. I also took issue with Kubrick unceremoniously killing Hallorann off as soon as he gets to the hotel. Hallorann makes it to the hotel and helps Wendy and Danny out at the end, and then we follow up with them a little while later, recovering and happy in Florida. So I was glad to see Hallorann made it out alive in the miniseries. Now we've talked about our characters, let's take a look at the plot a little bit closer. I won't be talking about every little thing, so I've picked out the highlights that stood out to me of where this got it right or wrong compared to the book and to Kubrick's film. And while you're here, why not consider becoming a member? It helps us out a lot, plus there's perks in it for you. But more on that later, let's get back to the video. As I said in my original video, I see a lot of debate about who the main character of the story is. I can see the argument that it's Jack because the hotel is listening to him and seducing him to do its bidding. And there's the obvious notion that Jack is a self-insert for Stephen King. But when I read the book, Danny stood out to me as the main character. I think because we spend so much of the book with Danny and experiencing the horrors of the Overlook through his eyes, it feels more like Danny is the main character. I think there's definitely also an argument to be made that the Overlook itself is the main character, which is an interesting take too. In both this version and Kubrick's, Jack is very clearly the main character. We spend a lot of time with Jack as he descends into madness. Obviously with this miniseries we have over 4 hours of content, so we do spend a lot of time with all 3 family members, but Jack still feels like the main focus of the story. What I liked about this version is that it doesn't shy away from the context of what's going on in the hotel. Where Kubrick's version is played as uncanny and uncertain about what's happening throughout the hotel, this one lets you in on what's happening. I think the key to this is showing Jack finding all the old paperwork down in the cellar, which is missing from Kubrick's film. It's a really important part of the story. While Danny is actively experiencing the hauntings, Jack is reading about things that have happened in the hotel over the years, and this information is being fed to him by the hotel to seduce him. An example I loved, which is translated really well from the book, is when the family is shown the presidential suite. Danny sees blood and brain matter splattered across the wall. He closes his eyes, and when he looks back, it's all gone. And later we see Jack reading about incidents in the hotel, and we see there was indeed a murder in that room. Along with the change in Hallorann, my other main issue with Kubrick's film was the drastic change in the ending. As a recap, in the book, Jack's main job as winter caretaker is to dump the boiler to relieve its pressure. Due to the mounting influence from the hotel and all its ghosts, Jack neglects this duty and the pressure builds, which is also a nice little metaphor for Jack's unchecked anger. But as Jack is about to kill Danny, he has a moment of clarity and remembers the boiler. He has enough sense to urge Danny to run, and Danny escapes with Wendy and Hallorann, and the hotel explodes as they escape. It's so dramatic, and I also think it's poignant that Jack is able to free himself from the influence just long enough to save his son. We follow up with Wendy, Danny and Hallorann a few months later in Florida, where they're mostly recovered from the events of that winter. As I said in the previous video, none of this happens in Kubrick's film. The hotel still stands at the end, and Jack chases Danny out in the hedge maze, eventually freezing to death in the snow. And that's the end. It works for the film, but it's just nowhere near as dramatic as the book. Obviously, with King being involved in the miniseries, it's much more faithful to the book. It all plays out very similarly with the boiler and the explosion at the end. It's nice for Jack to have that little moment of redemption and sticking it to the ghosts and letting the hotel crumble. And then we have a bit of a time jump and we see Danny at his graduation with Wendy and Hallorann in attendance to watch him cross that stage. And as Danny's up there, he sees Jack's ghost. It's just a little weird moment that I thought was just a bit unnecessary. And then we see the ruins of the Overlook and see a sign that says, "Starts rebuilding this summer," and it ends. Kubrick's film is scary in a more psychological sense and adds some new original scares like the twins and the blood-filled elevator. I think the miniseries keeps the scares more accurate to the book. I especially liked the elevator scene. I hate those old elevators where you have to close the door yourself and it feels all rickety and unsafe. And Wendy's scared of it both in the book and the miniseries. The blood in Kubrick's film feels very on the nose and scary for the sake of it, but I like the way the elevator is done in the book and in the miniseries. It's a subtle horror. The idea of waking up in the middle of the night and hearing the elevator moving when you know there's nobody around to operate it is really scary. And then you add to the fact that you think you can hear people laughing and celebrating in the elevator. And then when you go to check it out, there's confetti and remnants of a party. It's great, and I love how it was translated here in the miniseries. And as a lot of people commented on the original video, yes, there are some scares that look a little bit goofy because of that classic 90s CGI. In the original video, I mentioned the topiary animals being one of my favourite moments from the book. I loved the scenes where those animals were hunting down Jack, Danny, and Hallorann respectively. I thought they were really suspenseful and just a really fun idea for horror. In the miniseries, they do unfortunately suffer from the silly looking CGI. I think they're most effective when they're still and then the snow gets shaken off of them to signify movement. But once they actually start moving, they don't look scary. I'd love to see this scene tackled with modern day CGI to see how scary it could be made. But maybe nothing will come close to the descriptions in the book, unfortunately. As I said in the previous video, I think what was key in Kubrick's film for me was that Jack felt insane to begin with. Even in the interview with Ullman, something just didn't seem quite right about him. And then the hotel barely sinks its teeth into him before he's snapping at Wendy and just acting like a complete freak. It's a slow burn in the book. We understand there's a history of violence when it comes to his alcoholism, but they're happy when they first move into the hotel. Once he starts discovering the paperwork and reading about the history of the hotel, that's when things start to change, and that's what we see in the miniseries. We get these little behaviours in Jack, like him rubbing his mouth and chewing aspirin, and in the book these are things we know Jack did when he was drinking, and the hotel's influence is making him feel drunk. And Wendy points this out to him in the miniseries. It's just nice that it highlights that the hotel is doing this to him and it's bringing out the worst in him, rather than Nicholson's performance that has Jack just seeming unhinged from the start. I think it's obviously very hard to compare a book to visual media. I've had lots of people comment on a lot of my videos mentioning this, and you're absolutely right. No film or TV show will ever translate a book 100%. It's impossible to get it all there, there's just not enough time. And no, just because a film or TV show is accurate doesn't mean it's objectively good. And equally, just because something isn't accurate to the book doesn't mean it's bad. I think a lot of people were angry because they thought I was suggesting that Kubrick's film isn't very accurate and therefore it's a bad film, which is completely wrong. And I do say in the original video, I think the film is fantastic and I do consider it a 5-star movie. But as an adaptation, I think it's poor. The book is a tragic but scary story about a family on the brink of collapse. They're already struggling before the hotel's influence exacerbates it. For me, Kubrick's film doesn't really explore this, but the miniseries does. So in terms of accuracy to the book, which is what this show is about, I'm obviously giving it to the miniseries. But in terms of artistry, and which is a better piece of media overall, that's going to Kubrick's film. Both of these statements can coexist. At the end of the day, I still much prefer the book to either of the adaptations, but let me know which version you prefer in the comments. If you're a fan of horror books, I previously covered some other Stephen King books such as Mr. Mercedes and Misery, so check those out in the playlist on our channel. And if you've got any recommendations for your favourite horror books and their adaptations, please leave them in the comments. I've got an ever-growing list to get to, and I promise I will try and get to them all eventually. I also want to give a special shout out to our members Rowan the Hero, Phantom Crow, MTSD, Cardboard Boxo, and Stephen Shabrockman. We really appreciate your support. If you'd also like to support us, you could consider becoming a member for exclusive polls and posts, as well as input on upcoming videos. We're working on some other incentives for our members, and at the moment our members have a discount code for Screen13, a shop we love that sells horror-themed patches like this one. We don't get anything from your purchase with Screen13, we just wanted to support a small business run by a horror-loving couple like ourselves. So if you want to get 15% off some amazing patches, become a bloody good member, and you can get the code which expires at the end of August. If you're a horror fan in general, consider subscribing and checking out our other videos. We have another series where we explore horror films that claim to be based on a true story, and we explore how true they really are. And my co-host Montgomery has a series where he talks about some underrated gems as well as some truly, truly terrible horror films, one of which is linked on your screen right now. In the meantime, I've been Emily, this has been bloody good, thank you so much for watching.